I've just been involved in a hit and run. Now what? Good morning. So I had this idea to do a series entitled Now What, where we would pose a question, whatever happened in your life in that moment, and we would answer it. We would come up with strategies on how to deal with it in the moment, and also be proactive for how to deal with it in the event it either happens again in the future or for the first time. And I find myself this morning in a moment of my own. And so I thought I would practice, since it's all part of the process, my learning curve, and pose a question to you. And today's first installment of Now What is simply, I've been involved in a hit and run. Now what? So let's start by talking about the story. What happened? Yesterday, Ben and I, my son, were on our way back from an event, and we were stopped, actually stop and go, at a very busy stop sign, an intersection. And as we're sitting there patiently waiting our turn, suddenly there's a loud pop, and it jars both of us and our car. So quite obviously we've just been hit by another car, which, imagine my shock, we're not moving. Neither are any of the cars around us. So, it's not my first rodeo, so immediately I put the car in park, and it just didn't turn out the way, textbook wise it should have. And I'd like to talk about what happened to us, and also what you can do about it, maybe so that it can work out better for you. I don't know. But in the moment, when you first realize that something like that has happened, for me anyway, I felt violated. Now stay with me. You're just sitting there, and all of a sudden, by actions of someone else, we were brought into this, which it's still unfolding. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I will set the stage for whatever will be as we move forward. So in the moment, after you get over the initial shock that something's occurred, then there's this big adrenaline rush. And for me, when I seek out the adrenaline rush, I'm all about it. But when it comes as a surprise, you're left afterwards, once it sort of starts to fade away, with this feeling of you just want to throw up. And that's how I was feeling. I get this rush, and then as it starts to go away, all of the feels and the emotions start flooding in, right? I've never been involved in any sort of traffic incident with my child in the car. So my go-to was, in the immediate after moments, was he okay? Was he injured? I also went right to money. How am I going to pay for this? What if we have to go to the doctor? Do they have insurance? How are we going to... Oh, yeah. So there was a lot of traffic. So how are we going to handle this? And I'll tell my story, and then we'll talk about how you could have done it, or how I could have done it better. Let my mistakes help you do better. I put the car in park, and there's, it's raining. There are angry people that are stuck at the stop sign all around us, and they're already starting to jockey for position and get ahead of us. And so I got out of the car and I walked back, because part of assessing the situation is making sure that the other driver is okay. So whether it was his fault or not, let's just move on from that. But I walked back, and the young man seemed to be okay. So I said, let me check it out, and because I didn't realize that there'd been any vehicle damage at that point. So I walked, and sure enough, he'd popped my bumper good enough that the entire bottom section had cracks and it had been popped out on the other side, so it would need to be replaced. And I walked back to him and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna have to exchange information. My bumper's, gone. So I go to get back, and he's like, okay, and he's a nice young fella. I go to get back in the car and my son doesn't really know what's going on at this point. And I go back in the car and I'm like, all right, well, we're going to try to move. And it's very crazy. Very stressful moment because there's cars going around us. And so I have just a moment where I go back and I'm like, all right, let's just pull off over in this direction. And then as I'm walking back to that car, I think, we're not quite where we're exchanging insurance cards yet. So in a moment of clarity, I walked back and I said to the guy, nothing personal, phone in hand, and I take a picture of his license plate. Here's some foreshadowing here. That was a very smart thing to do on my part. So I take a picture, and then I take a picture of the make and model of the car, just in case. And I'm like, all right, fella, let's just pull around the corner. He's like, okay, I'll follow you. He's being very nice. All right. So we pull around the corner, up a block, and pull off the street. And the one mistake I think I made, maybe not, he had been pretty agreeable up until this point, is I stayed in my car. We pulled off to this side road, and I didn't get out. And I called 911 emergency, non-emergency, and I said, do I need to make a police report here? This is what's happened. And I should have known better, but she's like, yeah, if you're going to file for insurance. So I'm like, all right, non-emergency it is, and here we go. And so I stayed in my car on the phone. And I just happened to look up into the rearview mirror, and my very nice young fella starts to drive away. And I'm like, wait, what? So I get out of my car, and I'm a little upset at this moment. Rain's pouring down, he's driving off, I grab my phone, and I'm like, and I go to film him, and my hands are shaking, and I end up watching him in the viewfinder of my phone drive away, and I'm thinking I got some evidence, but apparently I didn't hit the record button until afterwards. So basically I started recording when I was stomping back to my car, upset. So I did not get the piece of evidence that I thought I had brilliantly captured. And as far as how I should have done that differently, I should have gotten out of the car when we pulled over to the side road, and we talked about this afterwards, and engaged him in further conversation. Now, all of that being said, and all of the things we'll talk about on what you should do and how you should do it, there's no telling. I mean, there's so many variables. That the car could have been stolen, it could have been the wrong license plate, whatever. But there's these things that you can do to do your best to safeguard that the outcome is going to be as good as it can be. So here I am in the middle of nowhere. I'm about an hour from home, and I'm just not a very happy camper. And I decided to go ahead and make this video this morning because I find myself waking up, hoping that the world is going to be different or circumstances are going to be different, and they're not. Here we are. I got a bumper that needs to be replaced on a car I still owe money on, and the world isn't very fair, and who knows how this is all going to turn out, right? So in this series of Now What's, once we tell the story on what exactly it is that happened, detailing what we may have thought we did right or wrong in the moment, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about how we could do better, whether it happens again or whether it just happens for you in the first time, right? I've been involved in a hit and run, now what? Or let's just go before that happens. If you're involved in a fender bender, minor traffic accident, or vehicle altercation, okay? Because this didn't start out as a hit and run, but you have to look out for you and yours first. So there are things that you can do, I think, that can safeguard you and maybe make it a little easier, better for you after the fact. The very first thing when something like this happens is to make sure that you and everyone in your vehicle are okay. If there's an injury, call 911 immediately. Or if you think the driver in the other car has been involved in an injury, you know, thank God our little fender bender was very minor. It's, you know, it's going to end up costing whatever it's going to cost, but it was minor. And not everyone gets off with just a little tap to the bumper. So the very first thing to do is assess that all of the humans, living creatures, are okay. And if they're not, take action. You know, call 911, or if someone needs your assistance, give it, whether it's on your side or the other side. One pet peeve that I have, and I grew up in Florida, so the rules and maybe the vibe is a little different. But if there's not injury or death, move your vehicles. There's nothing worse than a little tap, and now you're causing a traffic jam for everybody else, and you're actually making it unsafe. And there's potential for someone else to get in a wreck as a result of you hogging the road, right? So if you're able to safely move your vehicles out of the way, please do so. I think there's this misconception that if we leave them exactly how they were positioned, that it's going to help. Yeah, no. Officers are trained to reenact or recreate based on speed, position, skids on the road, etc. So let's just leave it as my tip for you is if you've just been involved in a fender bender, move your cars out of the way. It's going to be safer for you, the other driver, and the people around you. Exchange information. Sometimes, if it's a grown-up in the other car, maybe you can handle this just one-on-one and not have to involve your insurance companies. I guess I should have started this video off with I'm not a police officer, I'm not an insurance agent, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a whatever. And my advice to you is just one woman's advice based on life experience, right? But exchange information. And I think after yesterday, maybe I want to take a picture of that information. And by all means, document. Whether it means you walk right up to that other car filming. You know, I got lucky. I don't know if in my case anything's going to come out of this, but I took a picture of a license plate that I've now since found out doesn't even belong to the young man that was in the car. It's registered to an older fella that is probably his father or grandfather. So that little snippet of bad news would tell us that I don't know how far we're going to get with this legally speaking, but it's out there. So you've exchanged information, you've documented as much as you can. If you can't take a photo of the license plate or in the moment, write it down, document everything that's happened. And again, sometimes it's not going to require anything more than an exchange of information, and then you can get it fixed. The bad part, which may happen and there's nothing we can do in advance or proactively to prevent, is you might just get involved in something like this and the other driver does drive away, and it's considered a hit and run and you are on your own to fix it. And if that's the worst thing that happens, it really upsets me and it gets under my skin because I'm really about owning it and taking responsibility for your actions. It was certainly a teaching moment sitting next to my own son. He doesn't like to see his mom upset. And after all that adrenaline out of my body, a tear or two were shed. But just because I was so worked up, right? It got so intense and so tight for that moment. And then again, when he drove off, maybe it's a girl thing, I don't know, but I had nowhere else to release it. You know, it's not like I could kick my poor car. It had gotten enough damage for the day. But the teaching moment for my son was these things happen, but thank God we were unhurt. Thank God, I'm a little sore today, but that's, we're alive. No blood was shed. And so I think I want him to walk away from that. All of those other things are things and they can be replaced, but he can't. I can't. And that's the most important thing. Number one teaching moment, besides the fact that we're alive and everything, was to remain calm. And as we drove away, he and I talked at great length about that. And it would have done no good as an example, me as a grown up, as a parent, or to the other driver, if I had gotten angry. If you there should be no reason to brandish weapons in this case. My life was not in imminent danger. We had an accident. He had an accident. He wasn't paying attention, whatever. And in the moment, I found myself, and I think it's just because I'm Kaaren. I don't know, a mom, a human, but I found myself in the moment immediately giving that young man grace. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. Maybe he was, on his phone. Mistakes happen. And then that guy drove away. So, my guess is that it's not his first bumper tap. Maybe, I can only... And in a moment of my own self-entertainment, I was like, maybe he's had a wreck before. Maybe it's not his car. Maybe he's under the influence. Maybe his insurance isn't current. Maybe he's been involved in a traffic incident before that involved maybe driving under the influence of something and he doesn't want to get caught again. Maybe he just got scared and drove off. I don't know. Is that too nice? It's how I'm wired. It is what it is. So now we get to the time to be proactive. What can you do in the future if this happens to you? So I've been involved in a hit and run. Now what? Well, first of all, always make sure that you have proof of insurance and your current registration in your car. I did. Actually, my insurance card, I think, might have been 1 6-month period ahead, but we're not talking about me. No, I'm just kidding. But make sure insurance and registration are current and they're in your car. If they're not, go check right now just to be sure. But if they're not, get that fixed. At least have a photocopy or something that you can. Because here's the thing. When you call to make a police report, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be nice to you if you're the victim especially. But you can get a ticket. Just so you know, if you don't have the documentation that's required, if the officer wants to, maybe he's upset because he had to come out in the pouring rain and write your report, you can get a ticket. So just make sure that you have everything that you're supposed to have in your vehicle or on your person. It's very important. Document everything that happens. Number 2. Take down a license plate, take notes, because adrenaline and the rush of, being scared even can affect you. So as soon as you can, take some notes, because if you're making a traffic report in particular, the police officer is going to ask you for specifics. So if you need to write down, the description of the vehicle, the description of the person, do so, because sometimes after the fact, our memories aren't as strong. So there's nothing wrong with, in the moment, just taking notes and writing down so that you can better tell the story later. It's going to happen. So number 3, let's do our best to not plan, but statistically, I haven't had a chance to get up and look all that. And that's not what this show is going to be about presenting numbers and this is how many people get in wrecks in a year, whatever. But the likelihood, if you drive a car, the likelihood that something like this is going to happen over the course of your lifetime is high. And most times it's minor. Sometimes it's not. But when and if it does, just be calm and be prepared. It's not the end of the world. If somebody taps your bumper and cracks your bumper, again, I can replace that for whatever amount of money it's going to cost, but I can't replace my child. I can't replace my life. So I hope that this first practice installment of a section I will call Now What was helpful or entertaining. I don't know. Should you find it entertaining that I was involved in a car accident? Probably not. But I want to be able to talk about this kind of stuff. I'm not a professional by any means on any of these topics or suggestions that I'm making, but things like this can happen. And other topics that we'll discuss later on down the road can happen as well. And I want you to be as prepared as possible and know that when they do happen, no matter what it is, other people have experienced too, and maybe there is a shoulder you can lean on here or resources that can be provided to help you get through it. But in this case, you've been involved in a hit and run. Now what? Well, we're going to move on. So I'll try to keep you posted on how this progresses. Right now, I'm not very optimistic. But I did everything that I should have done. I documented it in the moment. I made sure everybody was okay. Called the police to make a police report. And what happens on the other end and the other person, I had no control over what brought him to that moment, nor what happens after that moment. So I will let you know. And no matter what happens, we're okay. Nobody was hurt. And certainly things can be replaced and bumpers can be fixed. Thanks for watching. You don't know? Jack. Just ask Kaaren. And, this sucks. It just dawned on me as I'm making this video, I haven't even called my mother yet, so I should probably do that. And, maybe this is kind of, I don't know, no. Police officers are trained in accident whatever the word is. Oh, my poor little car was no match for his little pickup truck. Wait, what?